Welcome back, Fanfield family, and welcome to episode 4 of the Elder Scrolls Reading Club, where we look at the books within the Elder Scrolls games, read through them together, and then discuss them. Today, we're going to look at the book you chose on the last poll, Breathing Water. It's a fun one, so let's get to it. He walked through the dry, crowded streets of Balfell, glad to be among so many strangers. In the wharfs of Vivec, he had no such anonymity. They knew him to be a smuggler, but here he could be anyone. A low-class peddler, perhaps. A student, even. Some people even pushed against him as he walked past, as if to say, "We would not dream of being so rude as to acknowledge that you don't belong here." Serene Relis was not in any of the taverns, but he knew she was somewhere, perhaps behind a tenement window or poking around in a dunghill for an exotic ingredient for some spell or another. He knew little of the ways of sorceresses, but that they always seemed to be doing something eccentric. Because of this prejudice, he nearly passed by the old Dunmer woman having a drink from a well. It was too prosaic, but he knew from the look of her that she was Serene Relis, the great sorceress. "I have gold for you," he said to her back, "if you will teach me the secret of breathing water." She turned around, a wide, wet grin stretched across her weathered features. "I ain't breathing it, boy. I'm just having a drink." "Don't mock me," he said stiffly. "Either you're Serene Relis and you will teach me the spell of breathing water, or you aren't. Those are the only possibilities. If you're going to learn to breathe water, you're going to have to learn there are more possibilities than that, boy. The School of Alteration is all about possibilities, changing patterns, making things what they could be. Maybe I ain't Serene Relis, but I can teach how to breathe water," she wiped her mouth dry. "Or maybe I am Serene Relis and I won't. Or maybe even I can teach you to breathe water, but you can't learn." "I'll learn," he said simply. "Why don't you just buy yourself a spell of water breathing or a potion over at the Mages Guild?" she asked. "That's how it's generally done." "They're not powerful enough," he said. "I need to be underwater for a long time. I'm willing to pay whatever you ask, but I don't want any questions. I was told you could teach me." "What's your name, boy?" "That's a question," he replied. His name was Tharian Winloth, but in Vivec, they called him the Toll Man. His job, such as it was collecting a percentage of the loot from the smugglers when they came into harbor to bring to his boss in the Kamana Tong. Of the value of that percentage, he earned another percentage. In the end, it was very small indeed. He had scarcely any gold of his own, and what he had, he gave to Serene Relis. The lessons began that very day. The sorceress brought her pupil, who she simply called Boy, out to a low sandbank along the sea. "I will teach you a powerful spell for breathing water," she said, "but you must become a master of it. As with all spells and all skills, the more you practice, the better you get. Even that ain't enough. To achieve true mastery, you must understand what it is you're doing. It ain't simply enough to perform a perfect thrust of a blade. You must also know what you are doing and why." "That's common sense," said Tharian. "Yes, it is," said Serene, closing her eyes. "But the spells of alteration are all about uncommon sense. The infinite possibilities, breaking the sky, swallowing space, dancing with time, setting ice on fire, believing that the unreal may become real. You must learn the rules of the cosmos and then break them." "That sounds very difficult," replied Tharian, trying to keep a straight face. Serene pointed to the small silver fish darting along the water's edge. "They don't find it so. They breathe water just fine." "But that's not magic." "What I'm saying to you, boy, is that it is." For several weeks, Serene drilled her student, and the more he understood about what he was doing and the more he practiced, the longer he could breathe underwater. When he found that he could cast the spell for as long as he needed, he thanked the sorceress and bade her farewell. "There is one last lesson I have to teach you," she said. "You must learn that desire is not enough. The world will end your spell no matter how good you are and no matter how much you want it." "That's a lesson I'm happy not to learn," he said, and left at once for the short journey back to Vivec. The wharfs were much the same, with all the same smells, the same sounds, and the same characters. His boss had found a new toll man, he learned from his mates. They were still looking out for the smuggler ship Morodrung, but they had given up hope of ever seeing it. Tharian knew they would not. He had seen it sink from the wharf a long time ago. On a moonless night, he cast his spell and dove into the thrashing purple waves. He kept his mind on the world of possibilities, that books could sing, that green was blue, that water was air, that every stroke and kick brought him closer to a sunken ship filled with treasure. He felt magicka surge all around him as he pushed his way deeper down. Ahead, he saw a ghostly shadow of the Morodrung, its mast billowing in a wind of deep water currents. He also felt his spell begin to fade. He could break reality long enough to breathe water all the way back up to the surface, but not enough to reach the ship. The next night, he dove again, and this time the spell was stronger. He could see the vessel in detail, clouded over and dusted in sediment. The wound in its hull where it had struck the reef. a glint of gold beckoning from within. But still, he felt reality closing in, and he had to surface. The third night, he made it into the steerage, past the bloated corpses of the sailors, nibbled and picked apart by fish, their glassy eyes bulging, their mouths stretched open. Had they only known the spell, he thought briefly, but his mind was more occupied by the gold scattered along the floor, the boxes that contained them shattered. He considered scooping as much as he could carry into his pockets, but a sturdy iron box seemed to bespeak more treasures. On the wall was a row of keys. He took each down and tried it on the locked box, but none opened it. One key, however, was missing. Tharian looked around the room. Where could it be? His eyes went to the corpse of one of the sailors, floating in a dance of death not far from the box, his hands tightly clutching something. It was a key. When the ship had begun to sink, this sailor had evidently gone for the iron box. Whatever was in it had to be very valuable. Tharian took the sailor's key and opened the box. It was filled with broken glass. He rummaged around until he felt something solid and pulled out 2 flasks of some kind of wine. He smiled as he considered the foolishness of the poor alcoholic. This was what was important to the sailor out of all the treasure in the Morrodrung. Then, suddenly, Tharian Winloth felt reality. He had not been paying attention to the grim, tireless advance of the world on his spell. It was fading away, his ability to breathe water. There was no time to surface. There was no time to do anything. As he sucked in, his lungs filled with cold, briny water. A few days later, the smugglers working on the wharf came upon the drowned body of the former tollman. Finding a body in the water in Vivec was not in itself noteworthy, but the subject that they discussed over many bottles of Flynn was how did it happen that he drowned with 2 potions of water breathing in his hands. Okay, let's cover a few key terms before we get into the discussion itself. Bal Fel is a shrine to the god of madness, Sheogorath. Appropriate for his domain, he's worshipped by those who just need more madness in their lives. If the Joker from DC Comics worshipped a god, he'd worship Sheogorath.
I'm a mad god. The mad god, actually. It's a family title. Gets passed down from me to myself every few thousand years. Now you can call me Anne-Marie. But only if you're partial to being flayed alive and having an angry immortal skip rope with your entrails. If not, then call me Sheogorath, Daedric, Prince of Madness. Charmed.
In centuries past, however, it was more than just a shrine. It was a large city, likely centered around this shrine to Sheogorath. The name Bal Fel translates to City of Stone. Vivec is one of the largest cities on Vardenfell, a massive island in the heart of the province of Morrowind. It's the center of worship of the god of the same name, and it's built on the water, which permits trade from the mainland. The School of Alteration is one of the 6 schools of magic and is focused on manipulation of the laws of nature. Water breathing, flight, negating physical weight, shielding, reducing the pull of gravity to fall slowly, that sort of thing. The Kamana Tong is the primary crime syndicate of Vardenfell. They're extremely xenophobic and are vehemently opposed to any Outlander presence on Vardenfell. They've infiltrated the local governments, including Orvis Dren, the head of House Lalu, one of the great houses of Morrowind, who has great pull throughout Vardenfell. Flynn is a kind of whiskey that is popular in Morrowind. It's moderately expensive. Alright, let's talk about the story itself. The first thing to note is that there are a lot of spelling and grammatical errors in this book. I would say it was an error on the part of Bethesda, but these errors are consistent in both Morrowind and Skyrim, suggesting it was intentional. The word breathe is almost always misspelled as breath, the main character's name is misspelled a handful of times, and there's missing punctuation and misplaced words here and there. I've taken the liberty of reading it with the proper corrections just to make the story itself a bit cleaner and easier to listen to, but the book itself does have these errors. Our main character, Tharian, was a member of the Kamana Tong, but the tiny percentage of pay he was receiving has driven him to go rogue. He has knowledge of a smuggler ship, the Morrodrung. If he's able to loot it, he'll likely be set for life. The problem he has arises from the fact that the ship sank in deep waters. The magic of the Alteration School can grant him the ability to breathe underwater, but given how deep he needs to go, a simple spell or potion won't be enough for him to get down, loot the ship, and get back to the surface without drowning, so he seeks out Serene Relis. A sorceress and master of alteration, Serene Relis is the person to ask if you want to understand the underlying fundamental concepts of water breathing. Serene's first lesson is that nothing is black and white. There are nuances beyond the common sense. There are no absolutes.
Only a Sith deals in absolutes.
Tharian approaches her with the statement that there are only 2 options, that she's Serene Relis and can teach him to breathe water, or she isn't. She proposes alternate possibilities. Maybe she isn't Serene Relis but can teach him. Maybe she is Serene Relis and won't teach him. Or maybe she can teach him, but he can't learn. When she says that the fish swimming and breathing the water is magic, I don't think she means it literally. She's not saying the fish are casting spells or anything. It's a metaphor that the core nature of fish breathing water is so natural to them that they don't even recognize it as special. That's the core of alteration magic, and understanding that the laws of reality aren't really laws, but more guidelines. Reality wants you to swim in water, not walk on it, but you can make reality obey you for a little while at least. She teaches him this long-lasting water-breathing effect, shows him how to push the duration longer and longer so he can delve deeper and deeper. He refuses, however, to learn the final lesson. While alteration can bend the rules of reality, it cannot break them. No matter how much you want something, how strong your will, reality will still reassert itself in the end. His dismissal of that final lesson is what brings about his end. He believes that his spell can last as long as he wants, that nothing can infringe on his rejection of reality. Not paying attention to his spell's duration, he runs out of time and is too deep to swim up and escape. Personally, faced with this problem in Morrowind, I'd probably enchant a ring with a constant effect water breathing effect so that as long as I'm wearing the ring, I can breathe underwater. No need to worry about time limits, as long as I ensure the ring stays on, I'm fine. Of course, Tharian here lacks the resources, skills, and knowledge to create such a ring. It's laid out. He had scarcely any gold of his own, and what he had, he gave to Serene Relis. Even if he had the requisite skill at enchanting and knew the water-breathing spell effect well enough to weave an enchantment with it, it's out of his price range. A grand soul gem, the only kind that can hold a soul big enough for a constant effect enchantment, is 200 gold. Then he'd have to track down, soul trap, and kill a golden saint for its soul. Again, not an easy task, they're tough. Then he'd need a ring to place the enchantment on. Our first lesson here is not to blind yourself to options, no matter how unlikely or how abstract. Judaism has a concept known as the 10th man doctrine. If, in a court of 10 people, 9 of them unanimously come to the same conclusion, it is the obligation of the 10th man to disagree, to consider the other options no matter how improbable. Just because you only see 2 options doesn't mean there aren't more. Take the time to consider all possibilities before you decide on any course of action. My dad has a rule that I feel is appropriate here. If you're not sure what to do nothing. Don't jump at the first idea that pops into your head. Consider the unlikely, the irrational, the impossible, and only when you've understood every aspect of a situation should you act. The second lesson here is to be aware of your surroundings. It's great to have something to protect yourself, but if you're not paying attention to the world around you, it won't matter. We touched on this in the first episode of the Elder Scrolls Reading Club. It's not enough to just see. You need to observe, to take in the information you're looking at. A closer inspection of the flasks Tharian found would have saved his life. They weren't wine, they were potions of water breathing. While he did say that a simple potion was not enough to get as deep as he needed and back to the surface, 2 of them would have almost certainly been enough to get from the ship to the surface. Breathing water is a fun one. It's got that trademark sense of irony that's in a lot of books in the Elder Scrolls world. If you want to read it for yourself, there are a few places that it always appears. Piran, a cavern to the northwest of Molag Mar, Telecero, the Dunmer stronghold, also northwest of Molag Mar, and in the Vivec Mages Guild in Cirilanwi's locked chest. Be careful with that last one, as if you get caught, you'll be expelled from the Mages Guild. You do have to break into that chest as part of another Mages Guild quest though, so maybe grab it then. It can also be found in Skyrim. It's a skill book, so the first time you read it, you'll get a 1-point bonus to your alteration skill. Serene Relis can be found in Morrowind. She has a small house in Tel Brenora and is the master trainer for alteration. She can also train you in 2 other schools of magic, destruction and mysticism. While she doesn't teach the player any spells, she does know the spell Vivec's Kiss, which is the most powerful base water-breathing spell in the game, lasting a whopping 100 seconds.
How wonderful. Welcome, Outlander.
So that's breathing water. What do you think of this story? Have you ever found it and read it yourself? Are there any lessons I missed while covering it? Let me know down in the comments. On Thursday, I've got a special bonus video for you to celebrate Halloween covering one of the most deeply terrifying creatures in all of Star Wars. On the next episode of the Elder Scrolls Reading Club, we'll take a look at the Axeman. There's also a poll up right now to determine what book we cover after that, so go vote. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this sort of video, please hit that subscribe button. There's a new episode of the Elder Scrolls Reading Club every single Tuesday, a different video every Friday, and shorts Saturday and Sunday. If you want to check out the full playlist of the Elder Scrolls Reading Club, click here. Or click here for a video discussing the Sith Lord of Pain, Darth Sion. Thank you again so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.